insurance. This is Tony Cañas, and today I want to talk to you about useless work that you should probably just stop doing. I got this idea from The 4-Hour Workweek, which is a book, I believe, by Tim Ferriss. I might have that wrong, but I believe it's Tim Ferriss. And I read this book back before I worked in insurance, when I worked in transportation, The 4-Hour Workweek. And it is just packed with a whole bunch of crazy ideas. The biggest thing I got from it, it led me to read another book called the 80-20 Principle, which someday I'll make a video on. One of the ideas that I found really interesting from this book is a rather minor one. In the corporate world, and the insurance world is certainly guilty of this particular sin, there is a strong tendency for things to just ossify into place. So there's a very good chance that part of the work that you have been trained to do and that you have been told you have to do, especially reports, that's where it happens a lot. There is a chance that at least one of the things that you have to report on, that you spend time on every week, is so worthless that nobody actually reads it. Nobody actually utilizes the information in it. Quite simply, the only reason that particular assignment exists is because at some point it had some use, but it's been so long that the process into which it fed, into which it was an input, has been changed, and it no longer requires the input, but they've never changed it because the departments just are silent like that. So how it worked out in my own career when I was in transportation, there was a report called Home Time Report. And so I dispatched truck drivers. And part of the job was making the money. Part of the job was getting the freight delivered on time. Part of the job was getting them home often enough. They got recruited on the promise of 48 weekends out of the year, on average, you'd get home. Of course, the definition of what getting home means is questionable. But anyway, long story short, there was this report that required a whole bunch of manual input and looking at the satellite report that tracked the trucks, looking at the tracking reports, figuring out how long each driver got to be at home, and reporting back what percentage of the drivers actually got to spend at least 36 hours at home for the weekend, which by itself is not a real weekend. But anyway, that was the standard. So you report what percentage of your drivers didn't get to go home for at least 36 hours, and you have to put an explanation on the ones that didn't make it home for an appropriate amount of time. When I read the book, I thought about it, and I'm like, I don't think anybody actually reads this report. And we had to file it. We had to print it and put it in my boss's inbox. And I never actually saw him looking at it. It never got mentioned in any sort of meetings. It never got mentioned anywhere. So I figured that I would follow the book's advice and just stop doing this report that I thought was useless. So I stopped. And I had been working at the company for about a year and a half, and I just stopped doing it. I literally just stopped. Didn't say anything to my boss, didn't ask anybody, didn't tell my coworkers. I just stopped doing it. And I worked at the company for another 3 years before the economy tanked and many of us got downsized. And in those 3 years, nobody asked for the stupid report. New people kept getting trained on doing it. Nobody asked for the report. And in the case of that particular report, I'm not even against the fact that the report existed. When it comes to when I was getting trained, learning how to do the report as a training exercise made sense, because it taught me to think of which of my drivers are getting home, how much time are they getting home, and how is that connected to productivity and turnover. But the reality is, once you get to know your drivers, and once you've been doing the job for, let's say, 6 months to a year, you know this information. You intuitively know which of your drivers didn't get home because they yelled at you for it. You know if some of your drivers are getting stuck out on the road too often, not on their own choice, and not making more money for doing that. You figure it out. So anyway, long story short, having been taught how to do the report probably had some value to it. Being required to do it every week after you've been there for a while just didn't make any sense, and nobody was using this report for anything at all. I won't say I guarantee, but there's a very good chance that in your own work within the insurance industry, there are some activities and some reports especially that are worthless, that were important back in the day, and quite simply are no longer used, but people are still being trained to do them, so they just do them. Be careful about it. Don't choose something that's going to get you fired, and make sure that you are up to date on everything else. Make sure that you are performing well in the rest of the job. You don't want to do this if you're already in a PIP, for example, if you're already in trouble, if you're fairly sure that something that you produce in your day job is not actually used for anything, just stop doing it. Stop doing it at least for a couple of weeks. See what happens. And if your boss asks about it, maybe tell him or her that you'd like to understand what this report feeds into, who gets this report downstream and actually does something with it. And if it turns out that it does have a utility, then just apologize and get back to doing it. There's a very good chance that there's some stuff out there that is just useless. And this is how you start finding within your job. Eventually, I want you to get to an 80-20 principle. Eventually, I want you to figure out the 20% of your job that delivers 80% of the results, and to focus more strongly on that 20%. And we'll, like I said, I'll do a review of the 80-20 book. I have found over time that it is a great way to think about the tasks that I'm supposed to do at work. When you're new to the job, learn everything, get good at everything. 6 months, maybe a year later, start playing with which things are actually worth doing, which things actually build value for the company and for your department, and start slowly getting rid of the things that don't build value. At the right company, you might even be rewarded for helping your department figure out which useless reports or other pieces of work that don't actually produce any value and that nobody actually reads could just be eliminated. I hope this is useful. Use the knowledge carefully. Be careful. It is worth experimenting a little bit once you do understand the job. Thank you.